Ladies and gentlemen, let me first express my gratitude to Sahitya Academy for inviting me here to talk to you. I'm also very grateful to Mr. Chaudhary for introducing me in such high-flown terms, which I know I don't really deserve. I'm also grateful to Mr. Chaudhary for declaring that I'm a real medical doctor and not a doctor of literature, as a lot of people seem to think. That makes my position a little easier, because when I was asked to speak on men and books to the very discriminating and discreet Delhi audiences, I was a little nervous to start with, because I'm not a man of literature at all. I'm no writer. I'm no professor of literature. I'm not a critic by any definition. And I was feeling rather at a loss to present a very plainly subjective, personal kind of view of certain books to which I have been indebted all my life. I'm glad that because of this introduction, you won't expect me to give you a literary criticism of any of the books, or either from the aesthetic point of view or from the presentation of the content or the form of the books and so on and so forth. I am not an avid reader of books, but I am a fairly good reader. I consider myself a fairly good reader. I must have read a few hundred books in my lifetime. And one thing I would unhesitatingly say is that they have helped me tremendously, both as an actor and as a person. There are very few books which started impressing me right from the beginning. I'm afraid since this talk is going to be in English, I'll have to restrict myself to the English books which I have read. When I got very passionately involved in theater and acting as a college student, one of the first things I heard about an actor or read about an actor was what Aristotle said. He said an actor is an athlete philosopher. An actor ought to be an athlete philosopher. And I thought this was a very tremendous thing to expect from an actor. On one side, he has to have a body of an athlete, a good-looking, shapely body, a very plastic kind of body, completely in control of himself, to be able to do with his body whatever he likes, whenever he demands it. And on the other side, he has to have a philosopher's brain. Doesn't mean that he has to expound a certain philosophy or a certain thought, but his brain has to imbibe a lot of finer things about life, a very broad-minded, a very generous outlook towards life, towards literature, towards theater, towards all the fine things of life. An athlete philosopher, I thought, was too great a demand to be fulfilled by any actor. And at that age, this was in 1946, almost 45 years now. At that time, I thought this challenge is worth taking. As luck would have it, I was studying in the medical college at that time, and the first book that really left an imprint on me was during the first 2 years of my medical career, and it was a medical book called Gray's Anatomy, A Human Anatomy. And the second book that impressed me terribly was a book on human physiology, the functioning of the human body, by Samson Wright. The structure of human body and the functioning of the various systems that existed in the human body, how the human body was constructed, what was the role of the muscles, role of the joints, role of the brain, role of the various vital systems like cardiac system and respiratory system and digestive system and the lot. And I think that has helped me right through my life, right till today, both as an actor and as a person, as a liver of life, if I may say so. And particularly the functions of the various systems in body, the physiology, as we call it in the medical college. It tells you the functions of various systems, how the respiratory system functions. And it tells you, for example, that voice is not a primary function of the larynx. Larynx is really a trap situated into the body in order to prevent foreign bodies from entering into the lungs, into the respiratory system. And that gives you a great understanding of the production of voice, the projection of voice, and how to use your voice and how to use your breathing for voice. You can't go on speaking indefinitely, you have to breathe in between because the basic function of the respiratory system is to keep on breathing. And larynx is not primarily constructed in order to produce voice, but it's a protective trap for the respiratory system, and you have got to respect it from that angle. For example, it told me another thing about a digestive system, that if a person is constipated, his life becomes absolutely miserable. Somebody has asked a question, is life worth living? And the answer to that is, it depends on the liver. There's a slight pun on this, liver. Not just a man who lives, but the liver which is there in your digestive system. If that is functioning well, the life is really worth living. Otherwise not. I'm sure a lot of us have experienced it. I'm basically talking from the actor's point of view, but I'm also talking from the ordinary man's point of view. The importance of constipation, being constipated, or rather not being constipated, is not realized by us at all. And which was one of the first things which I realized in my life. And I think it has helped me tremendously during the last 66 years of my life. Now, similar things about anatomy, similar things about physiology gave me a lot of understanding of how this body of mine, which is given to me, is functioning, how I have to look after it, how I have to take care of it. The exercise part of it. When I was in Canada, I came across a very funny and a small little book called, it was a book made for the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. It was a small little manual, about 100 pages or so. It was meant basically for the mounted police force which Canada had at that time. This was when I was working in Montreal for my postgraduate studies. And this book gave me a very peculiar, a very interesting, and a very useful concept of the thing called exercise. Now, when we utter the word exercise, we all think of a gymnasium and all these modern contrivances which have been devised for us to take exercises for fashionable rich people. The concept which was given in that little book was that every normal activity can be converted into an exercise. For example, if you are having a bath and if you are rubbing your body, you should try to rub it so vigorously that it can be converted into an exercise. It not only helps the muscles of your body, but it also helps the skin. It keeps your skin healthy. It keeps your skin warm. It keeps your skin glowing. If you want to climb the stairs, try and run up the stairs instead of just walking. If you have to take a short walk, take as brisk a walk as possible. If you want to sit straight with a straight back. If you want to stand up with your tummy withdrawn. A very important thing about posture it gave me at that age, mind you. And it helped me throughout my life. That's why I'm mentioning all these details to you, because you're not likely to go through these books. They don't belong to the class of literature. And it said about posture that posture is one of the most important things you have to have in your life. You may be an extremely healthy individual, but if you are not aware of what the correct posture is, particularly from the point of view of actors, this is a very important thing I found in that book. Posture. I remember Mr. V. Shantaram, the great film director. I don't know how many of you have seen him in real life. He used to be a very erect man right till the age of 70 or so. And then he started developing a paunch. This is when I came into contact with him, when I was doing my first film with him, Pinjra. And he said, hey, you're a doctor. I've been erect all the time, all my life, and taking exercises and all, yogasana and this and that. And yet I am developing a paunch. How is that? And I said, sir, your posture is not correct. You have to withdraw your tummy all the time, whether you are sitting or whether you are standing. It is not the fat that you are accumulating, because he was extremely careful about his diet. It was not the fat, it was the laxity of the abdominal muscles that gave him a little paunch, which used to bulge out of his trousers. His waistline was absolutely perfect. I mean, these small little things, if you know at the right time, or if you know at any time and if you start to observe them, a lot of people are under the impression that it is only the fat which accumulates around your stomach and then you develop a paunch. It's not just that. It's the posture. If you have a correct posture while standing and sitting, you need not develop a paunch. Now, these are the little things which were told to me right during my medical studies. They were helping me as an actor, they were helping me as a man also. These small little things to take care of your body, to look after your body. But then the question of developing a philosopher's brain was much more difficult than that. Much more difficult than that. Luckily, I have been very fond of reading right from my beginning. But the greatest benefit that I have derived from my reading is preserve my sanity in the jungle called Indian film industry. Indian film industry is a virtual jungle. The kind of chaos that rules that industry is enough to drive even the sanest person totally mad. And if I was not fond of reading, I would have gone mad long ago, because I've been with the film industry for the last 20, 25 years. But it's my fondness for reading which has helped me. I used to take a lot of reading material when I went for shooting. If there was a shift for about 8 hours, at least 4 hours were wasted. Wasted in the sense we had to just wait doing nothing. Waiting for the next shot to get ready, waiting for the lighting to get ready, or waiting for the stars to arrive quite a lot of times. And that gave me a tremendous amount of time to do my reading. In fact, I must thank the film industry because it increased my capacity to read. It gave me an increasing time to read a lot of literature then. But that reading, once you are fond of reading, I think you are saved. That's one thing which saves you from all the calamities of life is reading. If you're fond of reading, then you don't have to worry about passing time, as they call it. Luckily, at that very juncture, I came into contact with two great authors. One was Bertrand Russell and the second was P.G. Wodehouse. Now, both diametrically opposite each other. And yet, they left a very deep imprint on my life. Although Wodehouse, as you all know, is known as a humorous writer, and he is perhaps the finest humorous writers of the world ever. But when you look at his literature seriously, it's not just humor. It's his very broad-minded way of looking at life. It definitely increases the horizons of your perception of life, the kind of life that you want to live, the kind of life that you want to understand. If you read his last book, Wodehouse on Wodehouse, it's an autobiographical work. He had written a book called A Performing Flea before that, and this later publication, which I think incorporates the earlier work also, Wodehouse on Wodehouse. It gives you a total insight in the man's character, how seriously he looks at life, how seriously he looked at life all his life, and yet produced such wonderfully humorous novels. That was P.G. Wodehouse on one side. And on the other hand, by chance, I read a book called Marriage and Morals by Bertrand Russell, where he has discussed the man-woman relationship, the institution of marriage, the institution of family, and so on and so forth. And basically, what really impressed me, of course, that book was a total work of greatness. This book was written something like 1933 or something, I forget the year. But about 60 years back, this man had the courage to produce some revolutionary thoughts about sex and about man-woman relationship, about the population, about the institution of marriage, about the institution of family, and so on. And what he really gave me from that book, and from then on, of course, I became a Russell fan, and I started reading anything and everything he had written. And what he really gave me through his work was a very harsh kind of rationalism, a very pure, a very chaste kind of rationalism, a rationalism which doesn't compromise with any sentiment, with any emotion, with any superstition. Rationalism carried to its farthest end. And he himself has said somewhere that if you want to be a really rational person, if you want to be a real rationalist, it's an extremely difficult thing to do. Because then you will have to go on arguing rationally about an issue right up to the end where the rationalism leads you. It pulls you. It sometimes tears you apart while it leads you to the final conclusion or the final solution. And then you have to be bold enough to face that solution courageously. That's what rationalism is. And that's how he concluded atheism was rational. And he gave me a great gift of atheism, Bertrand Russell, which I think has helped me tremendously all my life. His analytical faculty of discussing issues, going into a particular issue and examining the pros and cons of an issue, gave me a great understanding in trying to understand the various characters that I was playing, to analyze it to the last detail. And all the material that you had was the dialogue that was written by the author. From that, you had to create a character in your mind. And this creation was done, some people, some actors do it purely on an emotional basis, intuitive basis as they call it. Some people like to do it the rational way, some people like to do it an intellectual way, and I prefer to do it the other way. I started to analyze these characters, and it gave me a lot of help to try and understand the character, because unless, I found at least, unless one understood the character perfectly, howsoever great actor you are not likely to give a great performance. But on the other hand, if you have understood the character perfectly, and if you are an actor of a lesser quality, you can still give a first-rate performance. This kind of insight into the characters, this kind of great faith in atheism. Russell gave me another thing, and that was love of life and beauty. Love of life. He says life is an accident on this earth. You have to make it beautiful. There's a lot of ugliness in the world. You must create beauty, you must worship beauty. But that also means that you have to try and destroy the ugliness in the world. For example, you are not going to be just a hedonist, worshipping beauty and creating beauty and ignoring all the ugliness around you. That is not the real love for life and beauty. You have to try and destroy the ugliness in life. Poverty is ugliness. Ignorance is ugliness. Superstition's ugliness. Lack of discipline is an ugliness. And you have to keep on trying, destroying all these uglinesses in life in order to create beauty and to love beauty. But love for life and love for beauty, these are the two extremely important things which Russell gave me besides rationalism. And it helped me tremendously as an actor. As an author, as a philosopher, one may not agree with all that he says. But there are a lot of important things he can give you, not only as an actor, but as a person also. Since we are talking of interdisciplinary communication, I think it is very important that, Russell had nothing to do with acting at all. I don't even think, he tried to write some short stories, but he never even attempted to write a play. And even then, an actor like me to get impressed by, and not only impressed by, but greatly helped by what Russell taught me. I think one has to be grateful to these literary people because they come from various walks of life and you don't know how they affect you in your own career, in your own pursuit of what you're trying to do. And therefore, I'm extremely grateful to Russell for what he has given me. His atheism has given me a great confidence in myself. Of course, when I later read a book in Marathi, pardon me for referring to a Marathi book, it was about Indian philosophy, Bharatiya Tattvajnan. And when I read that, I was shocked to read that almost about 5,000 years ago, a philosophy was impounded in Indian philosophy, which was by Charvaks. And this philosophy, expressed 5,000 years ago in Vedic times, was totally atheistic. Charvaks, I found, didn't believe in God. They didn't believe in soul. They didn't believe in rebirth. They didn't believe in heaven. They didn't believe in hell. They said life is an accident. You get it only once and you have to try and make it as beautiful as you possibly can. You must have heard the story of the great saint of Maharashtra, Gadge Baba. He died quite recently. Well, he is called a saint, but he was not really a saint. He was a social worker, basically a social worker. And he used to tell his disciples, his function was to go to the remote parts of Maharashtra and try to preach cleanliness, getting educated, remove poverty, remove indiscipline, remove blind faith, remove superstitions. This is how he spent whole of his life. Walking on foot all around Maharashtra, thousands of miles. He died at a quite ripe old age when he was almost disabled. Finally, he was given a bus by somebody and he used to travel in the bus in his last times with a band of disciples, about 8 or 10 of them, very close disciples of him, very close followers of him. And he used to tell them, he said, look, I'm going to die one day. I'm going to die one day, everybody has to die. I'm going to die while traveling because traveling is my mission. Most probably I will travel in this bus and I will die in this bus. But the moment I die, you must remove my body like a sack of dust. Take it out of the bus, leave it by the roadside, and you carry on for the work that you have started for. Don't think that a great man has died. Even a great man after death is nothing but dust. So the municipal servants will come and dispose of my body. They will do whatever they like of it. But you must not waste your time in trying to what is happening to my body. Try to make a temple out of it or try to make a samadhi out of it and waste your time in doing things like that. Of course, it didn't happen because none of his disciples were really worth all his advice. But the point is that even a man who was supposed to be a religious saint believed in this kind of totally materialistic attitude towards life. And I think it is an extremely important thing, particularly in today's times, where we see a lot of emotional strife going on the front of religious bases all over the country, all over the world, if I may say so. I think it is very important to take this kind of rational attitude towards life and admit that it's a materialistic kind of life and live it that way. And therefore, I think Russell's contribution on that effect, which he made in about 60 years back, we are not anywhere close to that even. We read him again and again. We try to live, we try to follow his advice, but very few people succeed. And therefore, I think Russell's contribution in my life has been very, very great indeed. Recently, I was reading a book called Selfish Gene. Now, this is actually a book written on genetics by a great geneticist called Richard Dawkins. A second edition has been published recently with an addition of a couple of more chapters. Now, he talks about the Darwinian evolution in that book, right from the time when there was no life on Earth. There was only a soup containing a lot of water and ammonia and nitrogen and hydrogen and carbon and oxygen. And then somehow a molecule got formed which is called gene, the smallest unit of life which is capable of independent existence. And how it got evolved in the last 300 crores of years, how it got evolved and finally arrived at an animal called man. That kind of tracing of Darwinian evolution, we are not much more concerned with that. But finally he has put a brilliant idea, and that idea is, now he thinks that the evolution, the whole process of evolution, after this 350 crores of years, the evolution has come to a turning point by creating man. By creating man, evolution has given him a brain which is capable of thinking, remembering, having a foresight, having an idea called culture. Every animal has got a brain. Human being also has got a brain, with a difference. The difference is that he can think, he can love, he can remember past, he can look into the future. I mean, look into the future not astrology-wise, but intelligence-wise. And therefore he said, now probably the evolution has come to a turning point where a thought, an idea, a poem, a piece of music probably is the new gene, the new unit of life, the new smallest unit of life. He calls it meme, M-E-M-E. It's derived from a Greek word, meme. And he says now probably the evolution is going to take a turn for the first time in the last 350 crores of years. It is going to take a turn, and it is going to develop from thoughts, from ideas. I think this is an extremely important and a very exciting thought for me at least. For me at least. Because it tells me that, I mean, it is quite obvious that 4/5 of the man's brain is an animal brain. All the instincts of the animals man has got. Ahara, nidra, bhayamaithunancha. He has to eat, he has to sleep, he has fear, he has to have sex for reproduction. They are all animal instincts. But the capacity to think is something unique that he has been given. And therefore each thought, and then he says, don't give up man as a bad animal. Don't despair in man. All you have to do is to control the animal part of the brain and try to civilize man. He says it is difficult, we know. Because for the last thousands of years he has got certain memes in his brain. His brain is the new soup. the primeval soup in which the original gene existed. The brain or the human culture is the new soup in which all these memes have started floating, these thoughts have started floating, these ideas have started floating, and now they are going to evolve. Man has to be taught kindness. Man by nature is a selfish person. Man by nature is a cruel person. I mean, cruel is a wrong term, but is a violent person, let's put it this way. Because cruelty, after all, is very subjective assessment. But he says, if you want to teach altruism to man, you will have to teach him. You will have to take pains for it. If you want to make man kind, tolerant, non-violent, in other words, cultured, in other words, wise. And then he says, man is capable of accumulating a lot of knowledge. Yes, he is capable of accumulating a lot of knowledge. But knowledge explosion, what we are experiencing today is virtually knowledge explosion. But he says knowledge is not enough. What the man really needs is the wisdom that controls the knowledge. Merely by having knowledge, you can, if you have a knowledge of nuclear physics, for example, you can make an atom bomb or a hydrogen bomb and destroy lakhs of people in a second or two. But by the same nuclear physics, you can also devise cures for uncurable diseases like cancer and so on. Who teaches man to do this? It is the wisdom, not the knowledge. So for the man to acquire wisdom, you will have to try very, very, very hard. So don't give up hope in the man. Don't think man is a lost animal, that he is going to be an extinct species shortly. If we are careful right now, and if we sort of try and educate the man into all these nice ethical, moral values, which seem to be crumbling right, left, and center all over the world as we see today. And this, I thought, again, was an extremely important thought as a person to me, whether it helped me as an actor or not. I think it must have, somehow it must have, because after all, an actor is not just a technical person. Actor is not just a man who has read a lot of Stanislavski. An actor prepares of the building the character, my life in art. These books one actor reads, of course, they have to be read. They are very important books. There is no doubt about that at all. We read it at a slightly later stage. That's why I'm mentioning them a little later. We read these books as actors. They helped us to a certain extent. But what we found was that most of the thing that Stanislavski did was to codify what we were already doing. We were not aware of what we were doing, but we were on the right path, and he codified it. He gave us a system. He gave us a method to codify how to enter into a character and how to build a character, how to portray a character, how to understand the character. He did that. But that is not just enough. Somebody had asked me recently when I did a play called Kiruvant, and he was a person who thought it was the best performance I have ever given. He liked it most. And he asked me, how many years have you been preparing for this role? And I said, presumably for the last 66 years. And which is true. Which is true. Because I think behind every performance of an actor, the whole of his personality has to support that performance. For whatever worth he is. His physical, his mental, his spiritual, whatever you want to call it, all his abilities, all his personality has to support every performance that an actor gives. You can't prepare a performance in a year or two. Technically you can. You can learn the lines in 3 months. You can probably have another couple of months to get the movements right, the body movements right. Because as I said, the actor has to be an athlete also. He has to make his body do whatever he wants it to do. In order to do that, you might get another couple of months. But if your personality is not rich, is not developed, It is impossible for an actor to give a great performance. This is what I have always believed. And I think this is what is important, the development of the whole personality. And therefore, whatever you read, whatever you see in life, whatever you think, whatever you talk about, whatever you write, if you are a writer, everything goes into developing your personality, making your personality richer and richer and richer. And the richer it is, the richer your performance is going to be. So for an actor, I think it is the most important thing for an actor, apart from learning the technique of acting, is the development of the whole personality as a whole. And I think to this, Richard Dawkins gives me a very great cue in order to develop that. Not to live your life just on an animal level, but on a human level. And not just as a human-animal level, but as a human-human level. A person who has a lot of understanding, a person who has a lot of sympathy for his fellow beings, for the society. There is a lot of talk these days which goes on about your social commitment. A lot of people say to me, this is a very strange thing, you have such a social commitment in spite of being an actor. As if an actor comes from another planet or something. I think basically if you love life and if you love beauty, as every actor has to do, you have to have social commitment. It's a part of creating beauty. It's a part of loving beauty. It's a part of worshipping beauty, destroying all the ugliness in the society. As I said, poverty is an ugliness, and I don't like to see it. I like to destroy it by whatever means I can. Maybe I'm successful, maybe I'm not. It's not in one single human's hand to destroy poverty of this world. But to keep on thinking in those terms, at least to try to go in that direction, I think is an extremely important thing for every actor. And that's where we come. Finally, one has to develop an extremely self-confident attitude towards life. One has to learn to stand on one's own feet. One has to have a very liberal, a very broad-minded outlook towards life. And that definitely is developed by a lot of reading. Recently I was reading a book by Stephen Hawking. You must have heard that name. He's hailed as the new Einstein, or one step ahead of Einstein. He's a physicist. He was a physicist and he's a totally invalid person. At a very young age, of about 21 or so, he contracted a disease called amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, which was a paralysis of all his motor nerves, particularly the spinal nerves, not the cranial nerves. His facial muscles are intact, but both his hands, his feet are paralyzed. Eventually, his chest muscles are going to be paralyzed and he is going to stop breathing and die. This is a disease he contracted at the age of 21. And today he is the world's greatest physicist, absolutely sitting like an invalid in a wheelchair all the time. There is hardly any muscular movement except for a very weak movement of one of his hands, fingers of his hands, and his facial muscles, of course. He can grin, he can give you a very broad grin kind of thing suddenly. He has worked the theory of the nature of universe, of the beginning of universe and the end of universe. You probably might have read the theory of black holes. That's where he has, physically he has sort of given you a theory as to how the universe must have originated and how it is going to end in all the black holes. He says all the time, space and all the matter is going to get shrunk. I'm just explaining this idea. Not that I have understood it fully, because it involves a lot of physics, a lot of complicated physics, which I don't understand myself. But the thought that he was saying, this is how the universe is going to end, he says. And then he says, where is the place for God? Where is the place for God? There's a very curious incident about him. He was asked this question, because Einstein was asked this question, and Einstein believed in God, as you all know. And this fellow was not sure. Hawking was not. The actress, Shirley MacLaine, she had come to the party, and she was going into a lot of spiritualism at that particular phase of her life. And she was very much intrigued by this idea of a supernatural power who has created the universe, and not only created, but controlling the universe and so on. And therefore she kept on asking him a lot of questions, and finally she asked him a question, do you believe in God or not? And his very weakly moving fingers just pressed a couple, because he was not even able to speak. At that stage he had lost his speech also. So he was given a computer which he could operate with his movement of the fingers, and his speech was supposed to be transcribed by a microphone. And the only one word came out, no. A very strong no. Here is a man who, the world's greatest physicist, has now got the courage. I'm particularly mentioning this because a lot of effort today is being done to take the advantage of science and say that even science now has started discovering that there is another world and there is this supernatural power and so on and so forth. And Stephen Hawking has definitely said no. I'm not saying he may be right, maybe Einstein is right, maybe he is right. But I like to think that he is right, Stephen Hawking is right. Because I think a lot of strife today, a lot of racial hatred, the religious hatred is because of this firm idea of God, of a supernatural power which is embedded in our brains for the last 5,000 years or more. But I'm also confident, as Dawkins is, that eventually this meme, this idea, this thought, which was put into the human brain about 5,000 years back, is going to lose its life. As dinosaurs were destroyed in the animal evolution, after thousands of years, after millions of years, maybe this idea also, like dinosaurs, will be destroyed one of these days. And this gives us a lot of courage and a lot of faith to stand our own feet and face life courageously. I think it is extremely important. I have done that right from my childhood. It has tremendously helped me because I have never had any superstitions. As an actor, it has helped me. As a person, it has helped me tremendously. And I have been living like that for the last 66 years. And I don't seem to have done badly, am I? Not badly. After having said all this about reading, these days there is one very important question which is bothering me about reading. Are we using reading as an escape? This is a question which is bothering me. Do we keep on reading in order to escape from thinking? Do we keep on reading to escape from doing something useful to the society? Do we just find an escape into a book? The moment we want to avoid doing something, do we try and read? This occurred to me when a very, very dear friend of mine died of brain cancer. She was an avid reader, and we were all after her to write her autobiography. She had so many things to tell. And we all said, Kumudben, you forget about writing. If you can't write now in this condition, you can talk. Take a tape recorder with you and just dictate what you want to say. You have so many important things to tell to the world. And you must do this. And she says, no, I have a lot more reading to do. Even at that stage when she was dying, she said, I have a lot more reading to do. And it's then that this thought struck me, and I said, Kumudben, are you trying to avoid writing? Are you trying to avoid to tell the world what the world really deserves from you? And she suddenly became quiet and looked as if she was caught stealing something. And an expression on her face told me that. And from then on, she stopped reading. She stopped reading. Unfortunately, she died a few days later. So there was no question of dictating anything. But is it a possibility that we are using reading as a cover? I think with this thought, I think I should stop here. The questions and answer session should now begin, as Mr. Chaudhary has stated. The only thing I want to warn you is that I'm going to reserve the right of answering a particular question or not answering that particular question, because I'm not answering a question, for example, a personal questions. For example, like what soap do I use to keep my velvety skin glowing and that kind of thing. So I'm sure you're not going to do it, but I'm going to reserve that right. So please carry on.